Grace and peace be with you all this beautiful Sunday morning. It's my pleasure to welcome you to worship here at Trinity and to say a very special word of welcome to any of you who may be newcomers in our midst, those of you who are visiting here for the first time, and of course to our congregation through Eastlink Television. We welcome you all to worship. I do have one special announcement, or welcome rather, that I want to make, and that is to the parents of my college roommate, who I have not seen for 25 years, but to the Reverend Don Gillies and to Mimi Gillies. I am thrilled to have you here. It's great to have you back with your dear beloved friend Dean, who is also now a beloved friend of this congregation, so that you have traveled from Toronto to worship with us today and to enjoy the island, and your time with your loved ones is just a delight. And please give my love to Maureen. Wonderful to have you. If you are visiting, I invite you to sign our guest book following the service. It's in the narthex, and Greg or myself would be glad to contact you to answer any questions you may have about the life and the ministries of this church. And then everyone is invited, of course, to a time of fellowship in the hall following worship. And if you're not sure how to find your way there, please ask someone, and they'll either take you there or give you clear directions as to how to get to the tea and the coffee and the cold beverages and the yummy cookies. So that's following worship. A number of thank yous to our ushers who are welcoming us as we arrive this morning, to Wendy Wright, who has prepared the worship slides and is our clicker today, to Noah Rogers, who will be lighting our Christ candle, to Madeline Mossy, who will be singing a solo, one of my favorites actually this morning, and to Gordon Worth, who will be reading our scripture, and to Catherine Dewar, who will be sharing a very special Minute for Mission a little later in the service. This morning's worship bulletins are placed in loving memory of Ian W. Taylor and Joseph H. Taylor, given by Sandra and Mark Richardson and the Taylor family. We appreciate those gifts today. Congratulations are in order to Florence and Howard Murray, who are celebrating 60 years of marriage tomorrow. There was a gathering in their honor this past Friday evening, and all of us, of course, send our best wishes to them today. Two of our members will be celebrating birthdays in the coming days, to Heather Cameron, who celebrates on the 27th, and to Jillian Scantleberry on the 29th. Our happy birthday wishes to both of you. I believe the next slide, yes. I want to personally invite and encourage you to come out on Sunday, October 15th at 4 o'clock for a covenanting service. This is when we as a congregation, and I as one of your ministers, together with the Presbytery covenant in our formal ministry, which began a little over 6 months ago. And so I would encourage you and invite you and to mark your calendars and to come for a celebration in worship and a reception following on the 15th of October. We also wish to recognize the achievements of 3 of our congregants today, and these names have been given to me in recent days. Catherine Dewar is one of 150 nurses across Canada who were recognized for their contribution to nursing as part of the Canadian Nurses Association 150th celebration. Catherine is the author of Those Splendid Girls, and you may have read an article in The Guardian, I believe it was on Friday, about this. And so we congratulate you, Catherine, for that honor. And to Ginny McGowan, who was recognized in recent times by the national editors for her volunteer work. Where did Ginny go? Ginny, for her volunteer work with that national organization. We say congratulations. And to Don Scott. Don, are you here? Raise a hand. Don, way over here, who was recognized by MP Sean Casey for his outreach through our congregation, our pastoral charge, particularly in the leadership he offered in assisting us to become an affirmed congregation. So thank you for that. And I invite us to congratulate all with a round of applause. There are 2 additional announcements that will be made from the pulpit this morning, and I invite Linda and Norman to come forward.
Good morning. Well, Sunday school is back, cottages are being closed, and the first day of fall has come and gone. So this can only mean one thing. The Christmas fair is around the corner. 3 months from today is Christmas Eve. Better get your shopping done. 54 days from today is the Christmas fair. That would be November the 17th and 18th. Over the next few Sundays, you'll meet some of the dedicated volunteers who make the fair such a success each year. They will talk about their area and what they need and who they need and why they need you. So please take a listen, and if you can help in any way, know that you are truly appreciated. So let's prepare. Debbie and I are ready. Are you? Remember, 54 days, November the 17th and 18th. Please don't miss it.
Good morning. Just a brief word about the gala dinner next Saturday. It would appear that the tickets are all sold. I say that advisedly because at one point there was 3 left, and the next time I heard there was 7 left, and so on, etc. People have changed in plans and they turn the tickets in. But as of this morning, I'm pretty sure they're all gone. The other thing I want to mention is those of you who have food items for the silent and public auction, I would appreciate it if you could have them here at the church by 12 noon on Saturday. That gives the people a chance to get things organized for the dinner. And, oh yes, if any of you are going to donate something and you haven't told me, please tell me or you will not be on the official list, because we have to get it done this weekend. And then I turn it over to the typist. So give me a call today, tomorrow at the very latest, or else you'll not make the grade. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nort. And I invite Noah to come forward now. In this light, we are reminded of God's presence in this sacred place, God's presence in the faces we meet, God's presence in the bubbling streams, God's presence in the spruce and maple trees, God's presence in all of creation, the light of God everywhere. At the beginning of creation, the waters of chaos covered the earth. God formed land and brought life to it and created humans as helpers. In the time of Noah, God flooded the earth, then committed to keep it. Christ was immersed in the cold, rushing waters of baptism, an action of immersion into the fullness of the human experience. We hold fast to a vision of a life-giving river, bringing healing to the nations. Our hymn is found in Voices United at number 291 and on the screens, All Things Bright and Beautiful. As a deer longs for flowing streams, so my soul longs for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. God, we weep at the changes we see in the world. We feel powerless. We wonder where to find hope. We pray for mindful acceptance of the crisis at hand. Not acceptance that leads to complacency, but acceptance that empowers us to respond with clarity, competence, and faithfulness. and from the silence we continue to pray together. Refresh our bodies, minds, and spirits this day, that we may drench your world with compassion, love, and hope. Amen. This is God's Wondrous World, hymn found in Voices United at number 296. I invite us to remain seated for the singing of this hymn, and during the third verse, I invite all of the children to come forward. Good morning, everyone. Great to see you. Come on over a little closer, if you wouldn't mind. There's lots of room on the carpet. Yeah, a few more people making their way. This is wonderful. Well, as I mentioned when I welcomed everyone this morning and made the announcements before we started into the other parts of our worship, Madeline, who is our soloist today, is going to be singing a beautiful solo called I See the Love of God. And we're going to stay here in the church to listen to that solo after our time together. And I want you to listen for the words in that beautiful song. It talks about seeing the love of God in rivers and in oceans and in valleys and in mountains and in the eyes of old people and in little babies. It speaks about all kinds of ways and places where we see the love of God. And that made me think of a story that I want to share with you this morning. And it's a story that comes to me from a trip I took a long time ago to a place called Guatemala. And Guatemala is a country in Central America, and it's about over 6,000 kilometers from here. So you have to fly a long, long way to get to Guatemala. And I was in Guatemala at a time of year when it was very hot. The heat was just scorching. And if you tried to touch your bare feet to the pavement in the city, in Guatemala City, you would burn your toes. And Guatemala City has millions of people there. And there's a lot of traffic. And because of the heat and the buses and the diesel fuel, there's a sense of quite a bit of pollution in the air. And just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people walking around. It's not in the desert, no. Actually, there's a lot of mountains in Guatemala and a lot of lakes. But in the city itself, it's very hot. One day I was walking along with my backpack, and I was with the people who were also traveling there on a project that we were a part of. And a bus came screeching to a stop right beside us on the corner of a busy street. And the door flew open, and out of the bus, a man hurled himself into the street and then rolled through the street onto the sidewalk. And I was kind of startled, and I looked and I realized that this man hurled himself out of the bus because this man was born without legs. It was that hot day, as I said, and he was covered now in the dust and the dirt and the grime of the street, and he was heaving on the sidewalk, trying to catch his breath. And a very, very, very old woman who was selling some corn outside a little shop saw this man, and she slowly went over to a bucket, and she took a cup, much like this one, and she dipped it into the bucket, and she filled it with water, and she slowly walked over, and she handed it to the man. It was very nice of her, yeah. And so he took the cup of water, and he had a few sips of it, and then he poured it over his body, and he washed his hands with the water. And I've never forgotten that story or that image of the courage of that man to hurl himself off the bus so he could get to where he was going, and the beautiful image of that old woman coming to him with a cup of water. I see the love of God in a cup of water. And this morning, we celebrate water in our worship service. And that made me think of that story, and I wanted to share it with you. So I invite us now to move in this direction. We can sit where we are, but to turn our heads this way, to hear Madeline sing this beautiful song, and to think about other ways in which you have seen or you continue to see the love of God.
I see the love of God in every river, flowing wide, flowing free. I see the love of God in every ocean, reaching further than I can see. I see the love of God in every valley, offering shelter to you and me. I see the love of God in every mountain, standing fast through eternity. The love of God is all around me, whate'er the trouble, pain, or care. The love of God is all around me. If I will look, I'll find it there. I see the love of God in eyes of old folk, kindly wisdom shining clear. I see the love of God in little babies, sleeping softly without a fear. I see the love of God in every river, flowing wide, flowing free. I see the love of God in every ocean, reaching further than I can see. Reaching further than I can see.
May we see and may we be the love of God this day. Have a great morning in Sunday school. Go this way.
The first reading this morning is taken from Genesis chapter 8, verses 20 to 22, and chapter 9, verses 12 to 17. Then Noah built an altar to God, and took of every clean animal and of every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And when God smelled the pleasing odor, God said, I will never again curse the ground because of humankind, for the inclination of the human heart is evil from youth, nor will I ever again destroy every living creature as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. God said, This is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. I have set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth, and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every creature of all flesh. And the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. God said to Noah, This is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. And our responsive reading comes from Psalm 104, verses 24 to 35. Bless, O my soul, the Almighty, who rules all creation. O God, how manifold are your works. With your side, you made them all. The earth is full of your greatness. Bless, O my soul, the Almighty, who rules all creation. There lies the great and mighty sea, teeming with living things, both great and small. Among its sails ships, and there is Leviathan, the monster you made to play in it. All these look to you to give them their food in due season. What you give them, they gather up. When you open your hand, you fill them with good things. But when you hide your face, they despair. When you take away their breath, they die and return to dust. When you send out your spirit, they live again, and you renew the face of the earth. Bless, O my soul, the Almighty, the King of creation. May your glory, O God, endure forever. May you rejoice, O God, in your works. When you look at the earth, it trembles. When you touch the mountains, they smoke. I will sing to God as long as I live. I will praise my God while I have been. Bless, O my soul, the Almighty, the King of creation.
A reading from the book of Revelation. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb through the middle of the street of the city. On either side of the river is the tree of life with its 12 kinds of fruit, producing its fruit each month, and the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. Nothing accursed will be found there anymore. But the throne of God and the Lamb will be in it, and God's servants will the servants will worship God. They will see God's face, and God's name will be on their foreheads. There will be no more night. They need no light of lamp or sun, for the God will be their light, and they will reign forever and forever. Amen.
Oh, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord all the earth. Praise his name, God's glory proclaim. He is ever the same, day after day. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, praise his name, God's glory proclaim. He is ever the same, day after day. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, for he has done marvelous things. Let the heavens rejoice, the earth be glad. Let the sea resound and all that is in it. Let the fields and the forest sing for joy. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing a new song. Sing to the Lord all the earth. Praise his name, God's glory proclaim. He is ever the same, day after day. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. Sing praise to God who reigns above, the God of all creation, the God of power, the God of love, the God of our salvation. With healing balm, God's soul is built, down every faithless murmur still, to God all praise and glory. Oh, sing to the Lord, oh, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, praise his name, God's glory proclaim. Sing a loud song.
Will you join me in prayer? Like a cool, bubbling water from a spring that comes deep from in the earth and bubbles up to the surface. May this time, O God, of worship with our thoughts, our questions, and all that we are as human beings struggling to understand you in our lives and make purpose of our world, may these moments be to us like a rich, bubbling stream, providing us with cool refreshment, providing us with life. Amen. Well, you might remember maybe the last time I preached 2 weeks ago or so. You were very generous in hearing me grumble. And grumble about the lectionary text for the week and complain that maybe the lectionary people, the creators of the lectionary, might like to broaden their reading so that we get the full picture rather than selective pictures. Now this week, I'm pretty happy with the lectionary creators. They've provided some really good stuff for reflection and good storylines and a complete picture in my way of thinking. Now it doesn't get better being a salty old Newfoundlander myself who grew up around the rocky crags of Newfoundland when it comes to the stories about the flood from Genesis and certainly the river of life from the book of Revelation. And considering that for the first 9 months or so of our lives we swam around in the belly of our mums in a vat of water as we became human, that our bodies consist of something around 60% of water and our brains 71 to 78% of water, and the surface of the earth, 71% of water covers the earth. So it's no surprise, I guess, that the religions, all the religions of the world, have images of water that are important and see those symbols of important. And from that, if we feel that the Creator was so intent on creating human life and creation with that much water in it, then we might just think that it's an important thing to talk about. And yet in our culture, and especially here in Canada and in our world here, water is probably the least thing that we think about. We go to our taps, we flush our toilets, we run a bath water, we hop in the shower in the mornings, and I don't think there's too often we think about what a precious gift this is given to me. Water, rivers, has always been important. Through the very evolutionary process of us coming into being, we came out of the waters. Life revolved around rivers. Civilizations came to birth and grew around rivers. Humanity chose to settle by bodies of water that nourish them and sustain them. Rivers were the waters of life and an expression of the divine love. Agriculture, industry, religion, economics, cultural life of whole nations depended and still depend on flood cycles of rivers. Rivers symbolize the saving actions of God, a reminder of the divine presence. When we have baptism, we use that symbol of water to recognize a wonderful life and to give thanks to God for that life with us. So it shouldn't surprise us that the great mythologies and the great texts and the great sacred texts of religions like the Bible reflect an interconnectedness of all of life with rivers, with water. In our Genesis story, we are offered a wonderful, wonderful story where humanity is destroyed by water flooding the earth. Noah offers a sacrifice, and God is pleased by the aroma and makes a promise never to destroy the inhabitants of earth again. The rainbow becomes that sign of a covenant. And it's interesting that the rainbow is made from the residue of the flood and of the sun, another source of life and light that offers hope to us. And our story from the book of Revelation describes water as a river flowing from God out. It's a vision of a restored world, co-created by humans and by God, intermingling. And this world is dependent on our willingness to not be afraid and release the anxiety that feeds the desire for domination, whether it be for land, whether it be for air or space or water. The river of life flows freely from a God who offers life in so many ways. The river is life, figuratively and literally. Figuratively, the river runs in our veins. The river of life runs through our communities and through our lives, and we identify that figuratively as the presence of God that gives life. Life-giving water, we are called as a God who gives life, and as a God who encourages us to take that life and to make it known and let it flow through our lives into our relationships, into our world, into our communities, and into our global communities. Now that's sort of heady stuff. We can talk till the cows come home about God being my personal God, that river of life just coming through me and feeding me and making me a better person. And it can be something that focuses all on my spiritual well-being, that river that's in me. Heady stuff, personal stuff. But there's also the literary. The gift of water, rivers, brings life to our bodies. The literal water that we drink, without it we die. It is a gift of creation, freely given. It is a gift to be shared, freely shared, and a gift to be treated with great care, not to be hoarded. This is faith in action. How we share what we have. How we move beyond what's good for me, and as we move out into the world and allow that river to flow of life and say, what's good for people around me? What's good for the relationships that nurture me? What's good for the neighborhood here? What's good for the global neighborhood? And how do we put that faith and that life into action that moves beyond me, into all people? So that the gift given to us by the Creator is the gift that continues to be given through our lives to the world around us. Let me talk literally. Where is the river of life, the action of our lives? Where do we put that into action? Where does the rubber meet the road, so to speak? Where does our faith find action and movement, and where does it give expression? I want to share you a story. A smile goes a very, very long way. It's how Jordan came to bond with a playful, full of laughter 9-year-old when she spent a week volunteering at the medical clinic in the impoverished outskirts of Honduras' capital city. The boy had come to the health clinic for an infection that had spread to his left eye. The medical team diagnosed it with what was called neglected tropical disease, NTDs. Now, NTDs are a grouping of diseases that cause anything from painful scarring to blindness, to death. They're very widespread throughout the poorest parts of the world, impacting 1.4 billion people every year. 500 million are children. But for this little boy, the diagnosis was good. The doctors prescribed a very simple and effective course of treatment. The key, which was a steady routine of hand, and face washing. So a year later, when Jordan returned to the clinic, she was very surprised to see her young friend back in hospital. His infection had formed a tumor over his left eye and part of his face. The once cheerful child who laughed and giggled and was free with life was now sullen, dark, and distant. Despite following the doctor's orders, his parents were shocked that their son's condition continued to worsen. The doctors were not. Most of us take for granted that clean water will come splashing out of our taps and our toilets will dispose of sewage, which makes it particularly difficult to communicate one startling fact. The lack of access to safe water and sanitation is the number one killer of children around the world. It's killing more children than war, malaria, AIDS, and tuberculosis combined. Some 50 illnesses and diseases are linked to unsafe water, and it doesn't have to be that way. I don't know about you, but I'm sort of a news junkie. And last week I was quite interested to listen in on the discussions at the UN Council meetings. Because the agenda for the meetings was that they were going to be talking about climate change. And so I was quite distraught when I pulled up the website and began to listen to Mr. Trump, Donald Trump, who represents the richest, the largest, a very massive economy and market, a powerful nation with nuclear weapons, a nation that has plenty, rant about destroying, obliterating another country. There's no doubt that war destroys lives, and in wars, the lives that are really destroyed are women, children, the elderly. However, the continual war against Mother Earth continues to take its toll against the most vulnerable. Here are some facts that you might already know. I'm sure you do. 289,000 children under 5 die each year due to diarrheal diseases caused by poor water and sanitation. Let's do a little math there. That's 800 children die a day. A little more math? That means every 2 minutes a child dies because they do not have access to clean, good water. What's challenging about this is like food. There can be enough clean water for all. There are cost-effective technologies out there that can alleviate the problem of bad drinking water, and yet the God that we call market, the global and competitive markets, treat fresh water as merely an economic good, something to be monopolized, something to put a price on, something to be sold so that there might be a profit. Bottled water becomes commodified as a resource. You probably didn't come here this morning to have such a downer and a gripping sermon. And yet there is hope. The hope is not in the big governments, the people who go to the UN and make their speeches. The hope is in the people who from day to day recognize the gift of Mother Earth, the gift of water, the gift of life, the gift of the presence of God, and how we respond to that in small but yet magnificent ways. Do you remember, a couple years ago, I believe, a Sunday school class came here in worship with us, and they shared with us some of the work that they were doing around drinking water and plastics. Do you remember that? And they challenged us. They challenged our thinking to say, you know what? The water that we get in those bottles is the same water that you turn on your taps with. The amount of energy that goes to create those bottles can go and provide a whole lot of help for other people in the world. They challenged us in a covenant to be mindful of that and do something about it. That was hopeful for me. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where the river of life moves along. And then just last year, I was sitting in a council meeting. And if you know me, I don't like meetings. I just don't like meetings. And I sat in council meeting, and we're talking about having a concert here. Talking about how we can generate funds, because this is a big place and we need funds for it to carry on. It's part of the gig, part of what we do. And the good discussion came around to saying, maybe we can, what about bottled water? Give people water and whatnot. And I listened. And you can't imagine the pride that bubbled up in me when around that conversation came up. But do you remember the children spoke to us about water and the devastation of that? And at the end of the meeting, the decision was made quite clearly. We will not go down that road. Yes, we need funds, but the cost is too great. We're not going to do that. Those are signs of hope coming from within the community. There are signs of hope amid this large thing that seems so unwieldy. But in the small yet wonderful, great ways of living our lives and keeping attuned and being mindful of the world and creation, that river and that creation that is so good that God has given us continues to flow through us, through our hands and through our feet, into the community and into the world. For anybody to say we cannot change things, we do not have any control, I think that's wrong. We do. And it's happening right here at Trinity. It's happening in our individual lives as we move out and as we become the people that God calls us to be. There is hope. There is life. And there is God. So let it be. Amen. If you are able and would like to stand for our next hymn, River Running in You and Me, it's in More Voices United, 163. It's also projected on our screens. Let us sing together.
River
My name is Catherine Dewar, and I'm the chair of the History and Archives Committee of the church. And on behalf of the committee and of the entire congregation, I wish to thank Nathan Mayer for his recent donation of 7 volumes of research on Methodism in general and of this church in particular. Nathan, a retired United Church minister, theological professor, and published author, wished to trace the establishment of Methodism on PEI, explore the changes in doctrine over the years, and through analysis of the research material, see how the knowledge could give guidance in the future. He carried out his research in the Provincial Archives and Records Office in Charlottetown, PEI. He painstakingly extracted all the reference to Methodism, beginning with the very first reference in the newspapers in the late 1700s. So he had quite a journey. He had each notation photocopied, and then he put them chronologically in volumes. And I meant to bring one of the volumes with me. They're big binders, 7 of them, so they're about this high. He confided that he hoped he would live long enough to see his research finished, but he said somebody would have to do the writing. Nathan has given the church a great piece of work that could be the cornerstone of a church history. I can testify just how devoted Nathan was to his research. For years, I used to sit beside him in the provincial archives, both of us side by side, hunched over a microfilm reader in silent communion. And every now and then, Nathan would lean over and say, "Look what I've just found." And he'd be so pleased with some new research discovery. And a researcher myself, I realized just how exciting things can be, and you want to share them. And occasionally, I would lean over and say, "Look what I've just found." And ever the teacher and ever the promoter, he'd say, "And what are you going to do with your research? Are you going to publish it? You should publish this." And someday down the road, I hope some of his gets published. As a researcher myself, I can attest to the hours that Nathan spent doing this work. You could say hundreds, but it's probably thousands, day after day. In fact, you could almost set your clock by Nathan and the archives. He went in the morning, when the doors opened, and if you were sitting beside him, you would hear a little alarm going off at 12 o'clock. He had an alarm on his watch, and at 12 o'clock he would get up, pack things up, and leave for the day, often saying that he would like to stay longer, but his eyes were becoming blurry. As I got to know Nathan more over the years, I realized he was very humble about his accomplishments, which were varied and many. As a scholar and a professor of theology, he has many publications to his name. As a historian, several publications and awards. As a minister, he's touched many lives with his deep sense of religion, his compassion, his wisdom, his good sense of humor, and as an adoptive dad to several children, he has made a big difference in their lives. For the last couple years, Nathan has been a member of the History and Archives Committee. There, he was sort of our anchor and gave guidance, not with any pedantic suggestions, but instead with the raise of an eyebrow and the slight ahem, and followed by a question that would usually make us think about the situation in some different way. Nathan, if you can I ask you to stand? He's up in the gallery. And I'd like the congregation to stand, please, and turn around and give Nathan a big round of applause. I suspect by now we have them all embarrassed. Nathan, for all your works, gifts, and dedication, we give you thanks. The church recognizes the great contribution you have made to the church history, and we will treasure, preserve, and make use of it. Bless you, Nathan. Bless your works, and thank you for being amongst us.
Please join with me in the pastoral prayer. And I would invite you to respond in the yellow text. Maker of water within us and around us, in the waters of creation, in the chaos of the flood, in the river of baptism, in justice flowing like a stream, in all these things, thanks. You are present. We come to you wet and weary, storm-battered, flooded, seeking renewal. We bear witness to those who are depressed and struggling, those who feel hopeless and anxious or afraid. We name the great injustice of illness caused by unclean water and environmental degradation. We recognize our role in the warming of oceans and the magnification of storms. We ask you to hear the prayers of our hearts, both those spoken aloud and those we hold close. We thirst for your life-giving waters to pour over us. Quench our thirst and deepen our resolve to bear witness to the pain and the glory of the skies, the land, the seas, and the rivers. And the congregation said together, Amen. Let us now give a portion of our gifts. We give as we are called, as we are able. Your morning offering will now be received.
Let us join together in prayer. Every time we feel water wash over our hands, let us give thanks. Every time our thirst is quenched, let us give thanks. Every time we feel the coolness of mist, let us give thanks. Every time we are drenched by rains, let us give thanks. Every time we dip our toes into waters, let us give thanks. Every time we get our hair wet, let us give thanks. And as we give thanks, let us recommit our lives to God, Creator, River of life. All we have is yours. We are your people. Thanks be to God. Amen. Our closing hymn, Called by Earth and Sky, found in More Voices at number 135.
As we move from this holy place into other holy places, walk gently on the earth, holy ground. Light be our footsteps on the path, holy ground.
This earth is a dwelling for earth kind. It is not ours alone. We share the soil, the seas, the winds. This is our common home.
Walk gently on the earth, holy ground. Amen.
Amen.